Greetings. This is Celebration. My name is John Savers. I'm your host. And today we will continue with our series, Jews and Their Culture. Now, for those new to Celebration, let me say this much. This program does focus on peoples and their cultures and tries to get a better understanding of what makes them tick. We are aware that most people have an idea already of the various peoples and cultures in this world via magazines and television, movies, and so forth. We are looking, therefore, not to repeat what is already known, but to see if we can unearth from various sources, such as references, various books that might not be known to the public, including out-of-print books, magazines, bulletins, and so forth, which may have some credible insight to offer. And so this is our approach. By this approach, we hope to fill in the gaps that do exist in the present depictions. And on that note, you will have an understanding, I think, of what we are going to attempt. We're going to bring forth some information. However, sometimes it's well to lay a foundation in regard to what various given people or culture, how this group of people see themselves, what is their ideal. And then it's interesting to see how the ideal and the reality come together. Often there is asymmetry. Of course, the problem is that people are sinners, and when they sit back in the comfort of their abode, unthreatened and at ease, it's easier to strike an ideal note than when they're being jostled, insulted, etc., in the real world. So there is a discrepancy, as you, I'm sure, know. We have been trying in the last episode or two to let you have an understanding of how Jews, or a prominent portion therein, see themselves in regard to certain terms such as Messiah, such as dignity, human dignity, such as prejudice, and so forth. We plan to perhaps pause in a program soon to have a kind of a reaction, as it were, to the views which we find in these particular categories, as stated by our primary guide in this particular matter, Chacham Amsel, a rabbi who has written a book, a kind of a reference book in regard to morality and ethical issues amongst Jews. So on that note, we will now proceed. We will probably resurrect, if you will allow the word, our sic et non approach later in the recapsule. It's not to denigrate the ideal, but simply to put the ideal and the reality in perspective. So let's do that now. Let's go ahead and open up a new category to consider. This is not the recapsule. This is going to give you some further ideas in the matter of ideals, as it were, which Jewry strives for, or a prominent part therein. So let's do that. Most non-observant Jews perceive Judaism to be a set of laws relating to blessings, holidays, and rituals between man and God. But Judaism is much more than a religion. It is a way of life. A person should act Jewishly in everything he or she does. There is a correct Jewish way of doing everything, from tying shoelaces to playing ball to driving a car. Fully 1/4 of the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch, discusses the proper Jewish behavior in the workplace and in the business world. Although the stereotypical Jew is one who swindles in business, this practice is a violation of Judaism as serious as eating pork, or possibly even greater. What, then, is the true Jewish attitude to business? How do we know what is permitted and what is forbidden, and why? Now, this is a citation from Nachum Amsel, the Jewish Encyclopedia of Moral and Ethical Issues, page 29. Well, those of you who are familiar with my Fight, Flee, or Laugh program probably are aware of the citation which was given to the effect that there are over 12,000 rules and regulations governing how a Jew is to behave within the Jewish culture. It is pretty comprehensive. The individual who brought this forward in the citation offered this as a rather congenial rationale, as it were, for the rather restrictive kinds of laws that the communist states generally demonstrate. And also the sort of doctrinaire view, I think, also is sort of encompassed here. If you have all these rules about what a Jew must do to be Jewish, to live a Jewish life, there is the implication that varying from this is varying from the way of life. And this may not be justifiable. I don't know that it would be called a sin, but it is a variance which no doubt brought forth watching by rabbis who are, after all, the folks who decide exactly what God intended and for Jews, how they are to behave in all these big and little ways. People who varied markedly from this kind of thing probably could endanger themselves with excommunication, charges of heresy, and even the very feared curse. Now, I think something of the same developed in communism. It also offered a very doctrinaire approach to the views of the communist leaders, developed from Marx, etc., but which seemed also very congenial to Jews in particular, and therefore presumably congenial to the Talmud. Now, one of these would be the idea of social realism. Those people who questioned social realism in the heyday of Joseph Stalin's USSR were in great danger of being put in an insane asylum because anyone who doubted the the doctrine of social realism is prima facie nuts. So we get something of the same thing nowadays in modern quasi-Marxist America with the political correctness. I think that there's a tie-in with the political correctness, social realism in USSR, and the all-encompassing way of life which was found in the ghetto, shall we say. Now, we will now proceed to see if we can learn a little bit more about this very interesting subject of business. We do note, also, those of you who have seen my Fightfully or Laugh program may be aware that there is some reason to suspect that there are two kinds of laws, as it were. That is the law of behavior of Jew to Jew and the law of behavior of Jew to non-Jew. And the latter may be a situation in which taking, as it were, pirating almost, is a kind of like a part of the way of life. But at any rate, it was not forbidden. Acting ethically in business is not just another precept in Judaism. The prominence of upholding these laws and the outrage expressed for violating these particular statutes show how important upholding this area is within Judaism. The Talmud tells us that the first question a person will be asked by the heavenly court after he or she dies will be, did you deal honestly in business? A man or woman is not asked first about Sabbath observance, kashrut observance, or even how much charity he or she gave. Rather, it is business ethics that first concerns God. Another Talmudic passage indicates that the path to Jewish wisdom can be through the business world. It says that to acquire Jewish wisdom, a person should either study Torah or be involved slightly with business, and to become wealthy, he should be totally involved with business and remain honest. Midrash says that if a person is honest in business, it is considered as if he fulfilled the entire Torah. Well, let me interrupt here again to state that this honesty in business is probably, and I think likely, a matter disputed within Jewry as to its extent. It is certain that it applies Jew to Jew, but it is not certain that it applies Jew to non-Jew. And we get a sense of the latter problem when we consider the actions involved as described in the book Den of Thieves and also in the book Merchants of Debt. We're all familiar with people such as Milken and Boski and that crowd. But from the point of view of Jewry, were these people violating Talmudic guidelines? Probably not. What they were violating, however, I think, is that they caused what might be thought of as a lessening of Jewry in the eyes of the world, and in so doing, lessening God in the eyes of the world. And for this, they were to be condemned, but not necessarily for the business practices per se. And on that note, let's go forward here with our citation. Another Talmudic passage states that if a person desires to be a Torah scholar, he should study Jewish business laws. The severity of not fulfilling these laws is seen in a passage that says the punishment for not dealing fairly in business is equated with a punishment for adultery. This is a citation, once again, from Nachum Amsel, the Jewish Encyclopedia of Moral and Ethical Issues, page 29. Now, I think it might be interesting just to bring up a personal piece of information which I ran into, which I think has some bearing on this question of Talmudic law and Jewish observation and so forth. It just so happened that while I was in some sort of office, I don't know if it was a dental office or lawyers or not, I'm not quite sure, but there happened to be a law review type of bulletin in there. And I opened up the bulletin and I started reading a little article, and the person who was writing the article was addressing young lawyers. And his advice was, if you really want to be a good lawyer, if you really want to understand how American law works, study the Talmud. Well, I thought that was quite interesting, and it suggested that there has been, probably by means of pilpulism, a reconstruction of the reality of the American Constitution in such a way as to make it more congenial with the Talmud. Now, I also believe that this is observable in certain of the books which are found in American government agencies such as the IRS. The IRS has a kind of a tangled text of law, which often sends you all over the text itself to various sections to try to define what you were looking at in the original section. Often, I understand in the Talmud, there is this same necessity in certain areas of pursuing other parts of the Talmud to get a real understanding of just what was being talked about in the section you originally looked at, because there are references and uses of names and so forth which are stand-ins for the real idea or the real word or words. So I do see this effect, this approach in the IRS, and it, just as the Talmud is a book for specialists, that is, rabbis who have studied and studied and studied, and for what might be called non-rabbi rabbis, that is, people who are not actually rabbis, but who have studied and studied and studied. I think that you have to have that kind of approach to have an understanding of a grounding of the Talmud, and I think you have to have something of the same if you're going to understand the Internal Revenue Service, the Internal Revenue Code. And there are, in fact, people who specialize in that, as you well know. But I do call that to your attention because I believe that there are practical examples of how this works. And in point of fact, it does have a similar kind of structure. That is, we have the United States Constitution, and in Jewry there is the Torah. And issuing from the U.S. Constitution are statutes, and issuing from the Torah are interpretations. And issuing from the statutes are regulations which are more refining. And issuing from the original interpretations, as it were, are huge amounts of additional commentary. And I see, therefore, that there is a kind of parallel between the present United States Constitution, statutes, regulations, and so forth, which, as many of you know, have become very extensive, expansive, intruding into the life, intruding into the rights of property, and intruding in many ways that are obnoxious. We see this as a parallel with what occurs in the Jewry, with the Torah, the interpretation, the original interpretation, and then the commentaries on the original interpretation. Now, for Jews, this seems to be much more congenial than right now it is for many Americans. But as you note, Americans are coming to terms, as it were, with this new reality in their lives, governing their lives. It may well be that many Jews along the way had to go through the same process. This is not to say that I approve of the process, but it does seem to be happening. So there seems to be a practical reality to all this in your life, in the life of Jews, and in the life of non-Jews. So let's go forward a little bit more and learn more about this business. According to Maimonides, one of the characteristics that makes someone a Talmud Chacham, a Torah scholar, is that he deals honestly in business. Apparently, Maimonides understood that being ethical in business is a vital component in being a Torah scholar. The Midrash, based on a Torah verse that portrays the tribe of Zevulon going out and the tribe of Issachar staying in the tent, describes the unique relationship between the tribes of Issachar and Zebulun. The people of the tribe of Zevulun were the businessmen, and they supported the people from Issachar, who sat in the tent and learned Torah. The Midrash implies that Zevulun, the businessman, receives an even greater reward than Issachar, the Torah scholar, and is thus placed first in the verse. Rashi concurs. In an amazing statement, it is recorded that the blessing pronounced by the high priest upon leaving the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur was a prayer that the Jews should prosper in business during the coming year. That is, that the economy should flourish. Of all the possible prayers that the holiest person, upon leaving the holiest place on the holiest day, could have uttered, why did the Kohen Gadol select this particular prayer, which seems non-holy? One of the answers advanced is that the high priest understood very well that with the repentance of the people on Yom Kippur and the desire to improve during the coming year, if that business needs were not satisfied, they would not be able to actualize their desire for change. An adequate economy had to be a reality in order to make their prayers come to fruition. Hence, the high priest understood the relationship between business and spirituality. Now, this is a citation from Chacham Amsel, the Jewish Encyclopedia of Moral and Ethical Issues, pages 29 and 30. Well, I think in here is an implication of tolerance for moral relativism in the matter, because it's understood that if things are tough, if business is not going well, the Jewish businessmen may not be as moral and ethical in the workplace as he would be under good times. And therefore, a certain tolerance we see noted here. It is something that kind of reminds me in a way of a commercial that appeared on television, sort of a public, commercial, public interest. And the object was to keep lads from becoming juvenile delinquents. And the slogan went, "Don't help a good boy go bad, roll up your auto windows." So with that note, a good economy will help diminish delinquency and Jewish businessmen, we are to infer. Well, that's it, folks. That's a wrap. We're out of time again. This is Celebration. My name is John Savers. I'm your host. I do appreciate your tuning in. Hope to see you again next time.